My husband gave me my dream vacation to Italy. But the moment we landed in Rome, he took my passport and every dollar I had, then walked away and left me alone in a foreign country so he could steal my entire inheritance and marry his mistress. He was sure I'd end up homeless. He was wrong. Before we dive into how everything flipped on him, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more stories like this. Leah's life had always looked like the definition of calm stability. As a modest, hijab-wearing woman who took her faith seriously, she lived in a beautiful house in an exclusive Jakarta neighborhood. A mansion her late father had left her along with blue-chip stocks, substantial savings, and several seven-figure deposits. She never flaunted any of it. She was generous, gentle, and almost dangerously trusting. At the center of her world stood Daniel, the handsome, attentive husband who brought her tea each morning, kissed her forehead, listened to every detail of her day, and offered to handle the boring paperwork. Grateful to be loved and protected, Leah handed him passwords, cards, and documents, never noticing how carefully he studied them, quietly mapping out the path to every dollar she owned. One bright afternoon, after Leah finished reading the Quran in her small prayer room, Daniel came home early with an excitement in his eyes she'd never seen before. He slipped his arms around her from behind. "I've got the biggest surprise of your life," he whispered. When she turned, he dramatically pulled out 2 business-class tickets and a folder of hotel bookings. "We're going to Italy," he announced. Rome, Florence, private tours and fancy hotels. The trip she'd dreamed of since childhood. Leah's eyes filled with grateful tears. She believed her husband was spoiling her out of love, not realizing every cent was being charged to the limitless black card that technically belonged to her. While Leah threw herself into planning outfits and imagining cobblestone streets, Daniel focused on the final step of his scheme. 3 days before their flight, he walked into the bedroom carrying a thick stack of papers and an anxious expression. "A few last travel documents you need to sign," he said. "Insurance forms, health declarations for the consulate, and this temporary power of attorney so I can handle bills if there's an emergency while we're away." Leah hesitated, remembering how her late father's lawyer, Mr. Harris, had warned her never to sign anything without reading it carefully. But this was Daniel asking, the man she trusted with her whole heart. He flipped page after page, tapping the dotted lines. "Here, here, and here, sweetheart. It's all standard," he assured her, in that soothing voice she loved. Doubting him felt like betrayal. Without reading a single paragraph, Leah signed them all. She believed she was giving her husband limited permission to pay utilities while they traveled. In reality, the forged document granted Daniel full legal power to sell, transfer, or liquidate every asset in her name, from the house itself to her investment accounts. While she imagined gelato and sunsets, he imagined bank transfers and a life without her. The day of departure felt like a fairy tale. They flew business class, reclining in wide leather seats while clouds drifted beneath them like oceans of cotton. Leah watched the sky and whispered prayers of gratitude as Daniel squeezed her hand. "This will be the best trip of our lives," he promised. He had insisted on carrying both passports, all the cash, and even her phone, so nothing gets lost. And Leah had agreed. Why would your own husband hurt you? When they landed at Rome's Fiumicino airport, warm Italian air and a blur of loudspeakers, screens, and unfamiliar signs rushed at her. Daniel handled immigration in smooth English, loaded their suitcases onto a trolley, and led the way while she simply followed, trusting he knew exactly where they were going. Just before the sliding doors to the outside world, Daniel stopped abruptly in a crowded area. "Shoot, I forgot something," he said. "We need a local SIM card for data, and I've been dying to use the bathroom since the flight." Leah immediately offered to go along, but he shook his head. "No, stay with the luggage. It's not safe to leave these bags. And this airport is full of pickpockets. Put your little crossbody bag into my backpack. Your passport, phone, and wallet are in there, right? If someone grabs it, you'll lose everything." His logic sounded perfectly reasonable, especially to someone who had never traveled this far before. Without a second thought, Leah took off the small bag that held her entire life and handed it to him. Daniel slid it into his backpack with a reassuring smile. "Much safer," he said. I'll be right back. Don't move." He kissed her forehead and disappeared into the crowd. At first she waited calmly, watching families reunite and travelers hurry past. 10 minutes became 20. She adjusted her hijab and told herself the SIM card line must be long. At 40 minutes her feet ached and unease turned to fear. She couldn't call him. She didn't know their hotel's name. She realized she had nothing. Not money, not ID, not even a phone number memorized. 2 airport security officers who had watched her stand alone beside 3 enormous suitcases finally approached. They spoke Italian, then switched to accented English. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need help?" Leah's eyes filled with tears. "My husband went to the restroom almost an hour ago and never came back," she stammered. "He has my passport, all my money, everything." The officers exchanged a worried look and asked for her documents. Her throat tightened. "I don't have them." He took them with him. That answer changed everything. "You must come with us to security," the older one said gently. As they guided her away, Leah's heart hammered so loudly she barely heard the airport announcements around her. Then, by some cruel twist of fate, she glanced across the vast hall toward domestic departures and saw him. Daniel. He wasn't lost or hurt. He was laughing, arms wrapped around another woman. Lucy, the stylish woman he'd once introduced as a distant cousin or colleague, was pressed against him like a lover, both wheeling matching carry-ons toward a gate marked Venice. They looked carefree and excited, the perfect couple heading off on a romantic escape. Daniel didn't look back once, not toward the security officers leading Leah away. In that instant she understood. This was no misunderstanding. Her protector was the architect of her ruin, and he had just walked away from her life as if she were already dead. The security office was a small, sterile room that smelled of disinfectant. A senior officer questioned Leah in stiff English. "You have no passport, no ticket, no phone. We cannot let you just walk out. This is very serious." She swallowed hard. "I'm an Indonesian citizen. My husband took my passport and left me here on purpose." They had heard stories of couples fighting and storming off, but her panic was too raw to ignore. The officers agreed to contact the Indonesian embassy in Rome and let her make a call through them. The problem was that Leah didn't know a single mobile number by heart. Everything was stored on the phone Daniel had taken. She sat in a corner with a borrowed handset, forcing her brain to dig through old memories until one number surfaced. The landline for Mr. Harris's law office, printed long ago on a wooden plaque in her father's study. When the embassy operator finally connected the call to Jakarta, it was past midnight there. Mr. Harris, still at his desk finishing paperwork, frowned at the unfamiliar international number before answering. Harris speaking. What he heard next was Leah's voice breaking into sobs as she explained Rome, the missing husband, the other woman, the stolen passport, and the documents she'd signed without reading. He listened in heavy silence, years of experience telling him this wasn't a marital spat, but a calculated crime. "Leah, I need you to focus," he said firmly. "Before you left, did Daniel have you sign anything?" Shame burned her cheeks. "Yes. He said it was travel insurance and a temporary power of attorney so he could pay bills while we traveled. I didn't read it." Mr. Harris muttered a quiet curse, then his tone turned razor sharp. "All right, don't panic. Stay with the embassy staff. I'll handle this." In Rome, he immediately called his Italian colleague, a lawyer named Mr. Moretti, to collect Leah from the airport and arrange safe housing. In Jakarta, he woke his assistant, opened his private safe, and pulled every file related to her inheritance, already preparing to fight back. While Leah sat in a quiet embassy guest room trembling with exhaustion, Mr. Harris was on the phone with every bank manager he knew. He ordered immediate freezes on all accounts tied to Leah and flagged any recent power of attorney as potentially fraudulent. His team quickly found Daniel's fingerprints everywhere. Paperwork to sell Leah's mansion to a shell company in Lucy's name, and large transfers scheduled to offshore accounts. "Block everything," he ordered. "Report it as suspected identity theft. Stop the house sale and lock every account until we sort this out." Transfers were halted mid-process, contracts suspended. Doors Daniel thought were about to open began slamming shut, one after another. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lucy were living out their fantasy in Venice, still convinced the world belonged to them. A private water taxi carried them along the Grand Canal to a five-star hotel. Lucy leaned against him, dazzled by palaces and stone bridges. Daniel boasted that Leah was too soft to survive, that by the time anyone wondered where she'd gone, he would already have sold the house and moved all the money. For 2 days they shopped in designer boutiques, drank champagne on their balcony, and treated Leah's black card like a bottomless well, never imagining that well had already been plugged at the source. The illusion shattered over dessert at a famous restaurant overlooking the Rialto Bridge. Smiling, Daniel opened his laptop. "One more gift," he told Lucy. "I'm about to pay for a luxury apartment in Jakarta in your name." He initiated a massive transfer from Leah's account and clicked Confirm. A spinning wheel, then a red error. Transaction declined. Account restricted. Frowning, he tried again. Error. He checked other accounts, each one locked. Panic rose in his throat. When the waiter ran Leah's black card for the bill, the machine beeped and spat out a slip. "I'm sorry, sir," the man said. "Your card has been declined. Do you have another?" In that moment, Daniel understood. Leah had reached someone. Harris had moved faster than he ever expected. They paid with Daniel's last emergency cash, hurried back to the hotel, and threw their designer spoils into suitcases. Lucy's panic turned to fury. "You told me this was safe," she hissed. "You said she'd disappear." Daniel, equally terrified, booked the cheapest flight back to Jakarta with a layover in Singapore. On the plane, he stared into the darkness outside the window, jaw clenched. "Just wait," he muttered. "Freeze my accounts if you want. When I get home, I'll make her regret it." He didn't know Leah was already on her way back on a different route, and that her home was being turned into a trap with his name on it. In Rome, Mr. Moretti worked with quiet efficiency. Within 36 hours, he had shepherded Leah through interviews and forms and placed an emergency travel document in her hands. At the embassy's guest house, she finally had a bed and food, but sleep wouldn't come. In that small room, she replayed every memory of Daniel, the gentle words, the gifts, the way he'd introduced Lucy as a distant cousin. Seen with new eyes, it was all theater aimed at one prize, her inheritance. The Leah who had boarded the flight to Italy as a naive, soft-hearted wife was gone. In her place stood a woman who had looked into hell and now wanted to fight back. When Mr. Harris called again, his update was blunt. "We stopped the house sale. Your money is safe for now." Daniel and Lucy panicked when their cards stopped working. "They've booked a flight home with a layover in Singapore. I've put you on another route through Dubai. You'll land almost 18 hours before they do." Leah tightened her grip on the receiver. "What happens when I get home?" she asked. "Then we prepare," he replied. "If Daniel wants to walk into the house he tried to steal, we'll be waiting for him." Leah didn't flinch. "Good," she said quietly. "I want to see his face when he realizes I'm not gone." The flight back to Indonesia felt endless, but Leah wasn't returning as a broken victim. She sat in economy between strangers, staring out at the clouds and planning. When the plane touched down in Jakarta, extra checks at immigration slowed her, but Mr. Harris had already sent letters to smooth the way. An assistant met her in arrivals, offered a respectful nod, and drove her straight to the mansion. Inside, the house she'd once known as a sanctuary now felt like a war room. In her father's old study, Mr. Harris, a serious-faced forensic accountant named Mr. Reed, and Detective Irwin from Financial Crimes, stood over laptops and stacks of documents, mapping every move Daniel had made. They explained the situation in simple, hard facts. The forged power of attorney had been designed to look legitimate, but it was trickery. Daniel had tried to sell the house to a company secretly owned by Lucy, then move millions into foreign accounts. Thanks to the freezes, most of the money was still safe, though he'd already burned through a depressing amount on their Venetian shopping spree. "We have enough evidence to arrest him now," Detective Irwin said. "Fraud, forgery, money laundering, but we want his own words. We've hidden cameras and microphones in the entryway and living room. We haven't changed the locks. When he comes home and his key still works, he'll think he's won." Then came the part that made Leah's stomach clench. "We need you in the living room," the detective continued. "Let him see you, let him talk, let him admit what he did in Rome. Once we've heard enough, we move in." Becoming bait for the man who had tried to erase her sent a chill through her, but she refused to back down. "This is my house," she said. "I won't hide in another room." That night she refused to sleep in the master bedroom. It felt contaminated. Instead, she lay awake in a guest room, praying for strength. By afternoon the next day, every hidden recorder had been tested. The trap was ready. So was she. Leah showered, performed ablution, and chose her clothes like armor. A deep navy silk caftan, a neat hijab, a touch of makeup so she wouldn't look fragile. She brewed chamomile tea, carried it into the living room, and settled into a single armchair facing the front door. Only a reading lamp glowed beside her, casting the room in soft light. She crossed her legs, lifted the cup, and waited with a calm she hadn't known she possessed. Outside, the city moved as usual. Inside, the air felt charged, as if the house itself were holding its breath for what was about to happen. Hours later, far above the ocean, Daniel and Lucy were crammed into economy seats, a cruel downgrade from the luxury they'd enjoyed days before. Lucy cried behind oversized sunglasses, terrified of what awaited them. Daniel stared out the window, clinging to bravado. He told himself the frozen accounts were temporary, that the power of attorney would still give him control, that the house was effectively his. In the taxi from the airport, he snapped at Lucy to stay put. "Let me check the situation first. If Harris has people there, I'll handle it. When it's safe, I'll call you in." Even he didn't fully believe his own words, but pride wouldn't let him admit that. The taxi dropped him at the gate. Daniel paid with his last cash, dragged his carry-on up the driveway, and found the gate unlocked. The front door key turned smoothly in the lock. Relief and arrogance surged together. "Still my house," he muttered. Inside, it was dark and quiet. "Leah," he shouted into the hallway, half expecting silence, half hoping she'd be gone. No answer. He stepped into the living room and flicked the light switch. The chandelier flared to life, washing the room in gold. There, sitting in the armchair facing the door, was Leah, elegant, composed, a thin curl of steam rising from her teacup as she looked directly at him. His suitcase slipped from his hand and slammed onto the marble. "No," he whispered. "You're supposed to be in Italy. You can't be here." For a heartbeat, he truly thought she was a ghost. Leah raised her cup and took a slow sip. "I'm not a ghost, Daniel," she said softly. "I'm the wife you left to die in a foreign airport." Something in him snapped. Panic and rage exploded. "What have you done?" he shouted. "How dare you freeze my accounts? Do you know what you've ruined? I planned this for months. I left you there with nothing so you'd disappear. Deported, homeless, whatever. You were never supposed to come back." Every word dropped cleanly into the hidden microphones above them. Leah set down her cup and stood, her movements controlled and calm. "Thank you," she said. That was a very clear confession. Daniel blinked in confusion until he noticed her glance toward the hallway. The study door opened. Mr. Harris stepped out first, face like stone. Behind him came Mr. Reed, Detective Irwin, and two uniformed officers. Daniel's legs nearly gave out. "Daniel Carter," the detective announced, "you are under arrest for premeditated fraud, forgery, embezzlement, money laundering, and attempted murder by deliberate abandonment." Cold metal cuffs clicked around Daniel's wrists as the officers pinned him against the wall. He thrashed and shouted Leah's name, but the more he spoke, the worse he made it for himself. Mr. Harris approached with a thick folder. "These are the divorce papers Leah filed this morning," he said evenly. "These revoke every fraudulent power of attorney you tricked her into signing. And this," he added, pulling out another document, "is a detailed civil claim for every dollar you stole and every luxury you and your mistress enjoyed in Venice. We will seize all of it." Daniel's defiance crumbled. "Lucy," he blurted, suddenly remembering the woman waiting outside. "Leah, please, don't drag her into this. She didn't know anything. It was all my idea. Leave her out of it." Even now he was bargaining, not out of love, but fear. Leah's gaze didn't soften. "Oh, Lucy," she said quietly. "You're still worried about her?" She turned toward the large front window. "Don't worry. I didn't forget her." Detective Irwin nodded, and one of the officers shifted Daniel so he could see outside. The taxi still idled at the curb. Its back door was open. and Lucy was being pulled out by two female officers as the lights of a patrol car flashed blue and red. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. "You lied to me," she screamed, pointing at the house. "You said she'd never come back. You said the plan was safe. I'm not going to prison for you, Daniel." Her hysterical words, captured on another camera, nailed her role as his willing accomplice. Watching Lucy dragged away shattered Daniel's last illusion of having an ally. His shoulders sagged. He looked back at Leah, eyes suddenly hollow. "Please," he whispered, "I've lost everything. Just stop." Leah stepped closer until she stood only a few feet away, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. "You think this is the end of your punishment?" she asked quietly. "Prison is only the beginning." Mr. Harris took over. "Our auditors uncovered all your personal debts," he said. "Millions owed to small lenders and loan sharks, secured by what little remains of your failing business. They were panicking when you disappeared." Daniel's face drained of color. He knew exactly how ruthless those creditors could be. Leah's final smile was small and cold. "Over the last 2 days, Mr. Harris has bought every single one of those debts," she said. "Every IOU, every promissory note. When you eventually walk out of prison, 10, 15, 20 years from now, you won't be a free man. You'll be bankrupt and still owe millions, and the person you'll owe them to is me." The realization hit harder than the handcuffs. A strangled animal sound tore from Daniel's throat as his mind broke under the weight of it. The officers hauled him toward the door as he screamed and cursed, his voice echoing through the house until the patrol car door slammed and the mansion finally fell silent again. 6 months later, the case had become national news. Reporters loved the story of a husband who abandoned his wife overseas to steal her fortune, only to be trapped by his own greed. In court, recordings from Leah's living room played over and over. Daniel bragging about his plan, Lucy screaming that he'd promised she'd be safe. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel received the maximum sentence, 20 years in prison for fraud, forgery, money laundering, and attempted murder by deliberate abandonment, and was declared bankrupt when his business was liquidated. Lucy, who cooperated as a witness, still received 7 years. For Leah, the final judgment ended one of the darkest chapters of her life and confirmed that every asset Daniel had tried to touch belonged solely to her. The mansion that had seen so much betrayal was eventually sold. Its walls felt haunted. Leah bought a modern, secure penthouse in the city center instead. With part of the sale and her existing wealth, she founded a nonprofit in her father's name, dedicated to helping women who had been financially trapped, deceived, or abandoned, both in Indonesia and abroad. Through the foundation, she funded legal aid, emergency housing, and financial education programs. She listened to stories that sounded painfully familiar and offered not just sympathy but concrete help and the quiet authority of someone who had survived the same storm and come out stronger on the other side. Almost exactly a year after the day she was abandoned in Rome, Leah stood in an airport again, this time back in Jakarta. She was alone, pushing her own trolley, her posture relaxed and confident. She studied the departure board, scanning the names of distant cities. Not Rome, not Venice. This journey wasn't about chasing someone else's fantasy. Her eyes settled on her destination. Istanbul, a place she had chosen for herself. A blend of history and faith and new beginnings. At the business class check-in counter, she handed over her passport and ticket with a smile. No one else was holding her documents now. No one else controlled where she could go. Later, sitting by a large window in the departure lounge, Leah watched planes lift into the sky and unlocked her phone, not to beg for affection but to skim reports from her foundation and reply to messages from women her work had helped. She exhaled slowly, feeling both the weight of what she had survived and the lightness of finally being free. She had been pushed to the edge of the world and left to disappear, but she'd come back stronger than anyone expected, including herself. If you're still here at the end of her story, tell me in the comments what you would have done in her place. And remember to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories of how the worst betrayals can lead to new beginnings.